All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Jacob, are you ready?
Ready? Yeah. Welcome, everybody.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess we can move quickly through to our roll call. Remember our norms. We're very good at the hand raising. I would like to use this group as a model when I work with other groups. Thank you to everybody. Tristan, do you want to do our roll call before we go any further?
Yeah, I can do that. Call on your name. How about you guys tell me what you guys have planned for? We got Angela.
Good afternoon.
You have anything planned for your Labor Day weekend?
Oh, that's the check-in?
Yeah.
Maybe some hiking. Maybe some
Ah,
camping.
that'd be nice. Dan.
Hey, good afternoon. My plans for the weekend. I think I'm going to start a new batch of hooch.
Oh, great. Diane.
I agree with Angela. I may go hiking. Otherwise, housework, yard work, boring things.
Well, you have to take advantage of the nice weather. We've got Heather.
Did you say Heather? It's hard for me to hear my speaker.
Yes, I did say Heather.
It's sheep drive weekend here in Reed Point, so I will be assisting with a variety of different things for Labor Day.
Oh, great. Oh, John.
I'm hopeful that I'll get outside like some other folks, and it sounds like I might need to head over to Dan's house.
Jewel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I plan to and spend time with my kids and grandkids.
Fun. McCall.
Thanks, Tristan. I am actually going to go to Seattle for the Grizz versus University of Washington football game to watch my friend's brother play.
Oh, fun. Mike.
I will be coaching high school volleyball on Saturday and then hope to spend Monday up on Flathead.
Fun. And Nick. Nick, are you here? Maybe he can't hear us. And then we've got Julie Mergel from the OPI joining us.
You guys, yes, for this weekend, going to a Carol game, heading over to Anaconda for dinner and just hanging out with family.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I think that was everyone.
Thanks, Tristan. Much appreciated.
I'm here too. This is Dean.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dean. I didn't mean to skip you.
I know that I've been gone the last 2 weeks. We've been starting school, so I've been working. And this afternoon, I am covering the office. I'm the secretary, so I'm going to keep my video off and my audio off, or my mic muted, but I will be listening.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Good to have you back. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide and try to dig into our work today. I focused on teacher licensing. And Krista, I'm going to hand it over to you to go over where we are with the counselor to administrator pathway.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. So our recommendations were put forward to the OPI legal team, and they saw no reason for any changes. So nothing has changed since we looked at it in the wording that you put in. I think that we could move pretty quickly and take a final vote that this is ready for the superintendent to bring forward to the Board of Public Ed. If you want to take a quick second to glance, to make sure it's what we put forward, and then do a quick vote. Jacob?
Hey, Krista, did you say you had this bigger so people could look at it?
Yeah, is it really small? Sorry, it's big on my screen.
Very, very tiny on our side.
Okay, hold on. Give me a second. I do. Oops. Okay. Whoa, too big. Okay. So here's the first one. Can you see 413?
I can see that clear, yes. If anybody cannot speak up. So what we're looking at is just the language that we agreed previously to put in. Dan, I don't know that it's been shared out with everybody yet.
I just got it this morning, so we can put it on as soon as the meeting is over. And then if you want to look at it, before we vote, that's fine. I can tell you that from when we had the wording, nothing has changed. So there wasn't any adjustments to it, but we can wait on the vote if you would prefer, if you would like to view it on your own time. Here's 414. Or 15 and 16 is the same, and it cut off 17, but it's the same as well. It's on a separate page, but yeah, I mean, I guess, does anyone object to voting on this, knowing that the wording didn't change? Okay.
In the absence of having to call on everybody, is anybody opposed to the language that was included? Right. If no one is opposed, then we have one thing completed for sure. Check that off the list. All right.
Okay.
Crystal.
All right. Well, that feels good. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so Diving into our subchapter work, I appreciate all that have turned in input, and I did review those last night. So there are obviously 6 subchapters for us to go over. We at the OPI, so Julie and I and the licensure specialist looked at and talked about areas that we felt needed to be looked at as a team, as the task force. And that is in terms of things that have come up as unusual cases, things that those specialists have had questions on, and areas that actually don't even make sense anymore. So legal had a few things that they wanted to provide as well. So today I have a lofty goal of trying to get through everything, but subchapter 4, knowing that that needs the most work, and that ties into the conversations that we've had the past few weeks with tiered licensing, praxis, mentorship. So I want to save all of that for next week, if possible, unless we get to it. We might just be on a roll today. But so that's why, if you're wondering why we're not looking at that one, I'd like to save that for next week. With that said, this should look familiar. This is what we used to do the deep dive, as many of you did as well. Also, as I'm talking through things, I've asked Jacob or Julie or Eric to kind of chime in on some of the comments that you all have put into your notes, your comments, but also please feel free, raise your hand if you want to add anything as we're talking. I'm not going to try to go too fast through things, but I am going to try to carry the conversation just to keep things moving, but I don't want to miss anything. So please, I am not opposed to just even interjecting, as I'm talking. So please don't feel that I'm trying to take over the conversation. I just really want to try to get through some things today. So with that said, subchapter 1 is our general information. So these are the areas that we brought up and wanted to look at. So all I did was really just take that that Google sheet and turned it into, where our notes were. So let's just do it one at a time. And, if it brings up any discussions. So the first one is subchapter 102, which is the definitions. And if there's anything you'd like to add, thank you, Dan. 1 second, I'll get to you. Please, in this part as well, we will take note and we can have that discussion as well. So the recommendation that we've been given and have gotten a lot of people asking questions on and a lot of concerns is the middle grades, 4 to 8. Should it be content specific? I actually ironically received a letter from a district and one of their teachers asking for this. And what I mean by this is having endorsements like high school. So like a 4 to 8 math or 4 to 8 science. So that would be the conversation I would like to start with. I might be even able to read, get some of what the letter. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just curious, why that would be different than the 5-8 that we currently offer, or the K-8, which covers all of those?
So John, to address that question, this is Julie. We do get candidates from out of state who on their university recommendation have an endorsement that is in 4-8 in a particular content area, such as like mathematics. And so what we do currently is we put them into a K-8 elementary generalist position with no endorsement area that doesn't then go to 512. So it's just it's a weird thing right now where it just kind of sits out there on that UR recommendation. And so the question is could they get the middle grade endorsement and then have an actual endorsement area that is recognized on their transcripts and their URs.
So would this be specific to out-of-state candidates, or would this something that you would want us to start offering in our programs as well?
John, I have no opinion about that. I just know that for out-of-state candidates, it causes somewhat of a really weird place there for them.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just from a small school with a shortage of math teachers, making certification more feasible. Unfortunately, options currently offered in our state are secondary education math certification 5 to 12 or a math minor. Basically, this person, if I'm reading it correctly as I skim it again, has right now the 5.8, but being a small school, they had their high school math teacher. Basically, they need a 9th grade math teacher. And so what I'm not getting is the 5 to 12 either. Anyway, this is only one example I just got today or yesterday. So Julie explained it better. I can look into this more and get more information. But any other conversation with it?
Yeah, Crystal, so what that means is like, would we want middle grade people who are coming in with this endorsement and a content area to be able to apply for a 512 license if they have that endorsement area and, for example, pass the praxis for that content area?
Exactly. So we're giving them the 4 to 8, or, they're wanting more than what they may be coming in with. So if we gave the middle school endorsement, then they'd be getting that. Okay. Anybody else? Is anyone opposed to this?
In the chat, Krista McCall said she wanted to learn more.
Go ahead, McCall.
Yeah, sorry. I think it'd be great just to kind of hear more about it. It seems like this might be a small handful of people that would benefit from this. And I think that we had the conversation last time of like making sure that we're not tailoring rules to a small number of people. But and I would just like to learn more on maybe how many of those cases we have, who it would benefit, and what those areas are that it would benefit them in, if it's math, if it's science, those kinds of things. Thank you.
Okay, would it, McCall, just as a proposal for next time, would it be, you think, beneficial to put in some scenarios, some exact cases of like where this starts to get kind of weird, like bring some actual examples to show you guys, like this person has this.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because I think I'm not really understanding why we would give somebody a 512 license if they only got the university recommendation for a 4.8, and especially if they then have the endorsement added, how that then would allow them to get that, high school license. So I just kind of want to hear more about this scenario, so maybe I better understand, because I think right now it doesn't make sense to me the way that you guys are laying it out, but I think that might just be because this is the first we're hearing of it.
Okay. And I thought, Angela, go ahead. I thought as we were working last week, it would have been really helpful if we were putting things actually in so that we know where we're going for the next meeting. So it may get a little bit, if you're not seeing what I'm talking about because I'm sharing, not sharing as I type, please let me know, but I'm going to try to do both, multitask here. Okay, go ahead, Angela.
I really appreciate this conversation, and it's very intriguing to me. I would like to visit a little bit with our EPPs and see what this might mean as far as us in Montana preparing our own students around this 4.8. So just some more information on that as well. But I think this is intriguing.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, crossing over between a content area and then trying to match that up with a grade level area. Yeah, we've done it all along. It's just like in music. I mean, how that becomes a 512, secondary license, unless you're allowed to teach K through 12. In that content. There's always just been some oddities to this practice. When you're talking a 4-8, you're really talking about concentrating on student welfare and being of an age group, and not necessarily the content of that age group. So if it's a K4 or if like we say a K8 degree, that really is for an age group of students. The 4-8 process I see that we're looking at here, and endorsement is trying to match up what's coming to us. The content necessarily for some 4-8 isn't going to be any different than, say, that 512 license to teach any specific content, except maybe on the extreme upper ends. But at the same point in time, I don't think you'd ever run into a situation where a person with a specific content couldn't handle even teaching at the higher end. To me, it just comes down to, hey, it's an age group of students, and how we benefit that and how we teach to that group of students, learning the pedagogy to do so compared to the content. But it'll be interesting to see where this conversation goes.
Thank you. So, I'm seeing, raised hand. Sean, hi.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Great.
Good. Hey, to Dan's question, what is the, and so it's kind of age level versus content level. Dan spoke to a couple different things around that. What is the end game? What's the suggestion, Dan? What are you suggesting around that? I'm just curious where a person thinks that might go.
So what I'm putting that around is if we do it for like secondary content specific areas, why wouldn't we follow that same structure? Whether even if it is 4-8. So maybe our secondary content specific becomes more 4-12 than it is 4-8. I guess that would be my end game.
Okay, thank you.
So just a little bit of information more on that really quick, you guys, is if someone has an endorsement in grades 4 through 8, that means they can't teach K3. And if they're in an elementary school, they can only teach 4-8. That means then if they're in a situation where it's 512, where the middle school with the high school is kind of put together, and you have many middle school teachers that teach high school as well, then they could only teach basically, the 6th, 7th, and 8th. They couldn't teach the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And so in Montana, when we're talking about pure middle schools that are not with the elementary as a K8 or not part of a 6-12 system, there's very complete middle schools. That's where this becomes somewhat of a concern. Is that means then they're only for accreditation purposes able to teach these grade levels.
And I didn't want to miss, Christine put in the chat that she believes 8A is the area of concern. And I'm going to slide it over. So 8A is age 3 to grade 3, early childhood. Christine, did you want to elaborate on that, or does anyone see that as an area of concern as well? Okay. Maybe she can't talk and she's just listening in. If you want to put anything else in the chat, I'll try to come back to it. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, okay, so and the question being, and I don't know. So the question is from that perspective. So of course, the endorsements around items B, C, D, E, and F, and so on is I'm fine with and familiar with. Are there specific endorsements then around age 3 to grade 3 or age 3, 4, and 5 or something like that? I know the early childhood program out of Western address some of these things, but I just don't know where it sits. So I'm unfamiliar. So help me out, please.
Julie, did you want to, I know that there's an early childhood for special education because we've come in contact with that. A lot of the times it's out of state licenses though, so I don't know much about the in-state.
The 8A is the early childhood, so it's age 3 to 3rd grade.
So like,
again,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I
So
was
it's
just
a
like a.
pre-K I'm
Go.
sorry. It's a pre-K to 3rd grade early childhood endorsement, and
Yeah.
many people do come with an endorsement that is pre-K through 3rd grade. So again, those are the grade levels that they're endorsed to teach in. They can't teach 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. They can only teach up through 3rd grade, and it's focused on early childhood development, early literacy skills. So that endorsement is a particular endorsement, if that helps.
Does that come from any, which colleges does that come from in state? Can that be endorsed? And does that endorsement come from each one of the universities or colleges in Montana, or is that more selective? Again, I'm just curious.
Sean, I'd have to look it up, but some of the universities in the state of Montana do offer a pre-K 3rd grade early childhood endorsement, but I don't think they all do.
Go ahead, John.
But I'd have to look up which ones.
Yeah, we offer it at MSU. It's a fairly new option. I think we're in year 3 or 4 of offering that as a license. It's a relatively new one. And it was actually one of the things I marked on my sheet is if we could change it, from saying age 3, if we could change that to pre-K or P, it might be more reflective of how it's recognized across campuses. And I don't remember how many campuses offer it, but it's a fair number.
This is just a logistical question to that. Some of our schools can't call it pre-K because of the way that their funding works. It has to be a like early childhood program or something like that. So I wonder if that would mess up with any of their funding or anything. I don't know. Julie, do you know?
There's terminology there that does have funding specifications around pre-K versus EC, like early childhood. So I'd have to look into that a little bit more.
Anything else?
I am wondering at times, you guys, if they've left it just middle school 4-8, because that allows them then to teach all content area versus then funneling them into just one area. It's just kind of a weird, how could you potentially put something in there so that they could maybe go K-8 or 5-12? I don't know, but I know it's just weird. We try to match up the grade levels with the content.
Okay, so since I don't see that we are wanting to vote on anything with this, we have some notes for us to get some information for next week. I'm okay to move forward unless anyone has some final thoughts on just this 102 section. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I want to ask John, just how big of a, let's just say we went to a K-12 certification, okay, but how, or a PK-12 certification for all content. So PK math, PK language arts, whatever it might be. But where would it come in? So just like in a K-12, in the current system, like in MSU, if I'm in a K-12 music education program, I get my elementary methods and I get secondary methods. How big of a deal would it be to expand that to all the content?
That's a that's a question we'd want to ask the faculty specifically, what that would look like to bring those methods down to those lower levels. I think a bigger question would be, it sounds like you're talking about like a generalist across the entire board, and I don't think we would be able to do that in 4 years. Not that we couldn't do it in several more years, but as far as bringing just those methods down specifically to add the early childhood, I don't know exactly what that would look like. If we're talking about math, for example, we'd have to, we've got elementary math, and it would be tying all those pieces together on one big piece. It would be a substantial change, but I don't know the exact impact, Dan.
Go ahead, Sean.
And my question around those 2 points, and I don't know if it's so much of a question or kind of a rhetorical question or just a comment. It seems like there's a lot of different certifications endorsements, and it seems complicated. And the more complicated, the more difficult it is to work through all these issues. So again, going back kind of around those points, is there any way to simplify this or to better group these particular categories? And I would probably have an opinion, but I sure don't have any great answer around it. But that would be my question I would throw out to you folks. Is there a better way that we could simplify the endorsement areas to just become more efficient and to create fewer barriers to teaching and employment?
Go ahead, Angela.
Oh, gosh, thanks. I guess I would thank Sean for that comment, and just add to the earlier conversation that John and Dan were having, that it's 120 degrees, 120 credits to complete an ed prep program in the Montana University system. And I think to the degree that things could be tweaked or changed to the degree that we're looking at here, I think would take a lot. And of course, we are entirely mindful here in our office about time to degree. And I think that's certainly something for this group to consider, so that we get these teachers in the classroom. We're also entirely mindful of cost to degree completion. And so, certainly if this conversation were to change and the look of this were to change, our campuses would adapt. I think it would be incredibly difficult, and I think it would take some time for them to turn the cart. So very interesting conversation nonetheless, and I plan on visiting with some of our folks along with John here in the next week.
Great, thank you.
I want to ask a question, and that's, when we talk about flexibility, my question would be, who gets the flexibility? Because what I hear in terms of difficulty is oftentimes it's difficult to match with other certifications that may have been gained in other states. And I think that's really where the issue is here, because if you're certified in Montana, then you're going to go through a program that aligns to one of the endorsement areas. But as I showed from Idaho, they have a lot of endorsement areas, right? And so then it's difficult to match other states that have many more endorsement areas with what are currently the limited number of endorsement areas in Montana. So it's, if you reduce, the question then is who gets the flexibility? So is there then flexibility built in to allow people to make a determination that, yes, this out-of-state endorsement area matches this Montana endorsement area? Whereas now I don't think that flexibility exists, is my understanding.
So Jacob, I think there's a couple of different pieces within what you're bringing up, right? So, and I think what we heard in the conversation from John and Dan and Angela, right? So the way that the endorsements and then the programming that you get is very specific to your endorsement. That's built around your endorsement. So for example, if you're getting a pre-K through third grade early childhood endorsement, you have to take particular classes. And we only have so many classes we can give you for all your general credits and then your preparation. And so then your classes are very geared towards early childhood development, early literacy skills, all of those components that go to an early childhood, versus like if you're in a 512 program and you're getting an endorsement in science, broad field science, then a lot of your coursework has to be geared towards the sciences. And then a K-8, of course, you want people to have, how do you teach math? How do you teach reading? How do you teach and differentiate for diverse learners? So those endorsements drive the programming. And so the 4-8 is weird because that's particular grades that you can teach. And is it to be a generalist in 4-8? But what happens when you have somebody that comes in that's not a generalist, maybe been prepared for 4-8, but with a concentration and has taken a lot of coursework around a particular content? Does that mean then we just give them the 4-8 license and don't honor then that additional endorsement? Then I think the second piece, Jacob, that you're bringing up is around flexibility, and flexibility for who, which I think comes up in subsection 4, which how do you get an endorsement? And right now, if you want to add a second endorsement, you still have to go through all the coursework, complete the university recommendation, and submit your transcripts for that. And so some other places, what they do is you take an exam to prove that you have that content already and then add an endorsement. So currently we have one pathway for adding endorsement. So I think, Jacob, there's almost like two pieces to what you're talking about. And one lives in subsection 4.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that, I don't know that I was clear then. I think essentially what I'm saying is the current list of endorsements oftentimes doesn't match up to endorsements people come with. And so if we limit those with the idea of increasing flexibility, does it accomplish that? It could, but then who has actually has the flexibility to make determinations? That was the point I was trying to make.
Okay, well, I think we can say to be continued. I have some notes down. I know Tristan's taking notes. And Sean, real quick, I am going to address at the end about maybe a little shift of timing. So I will be in touch with you, sir.
Okay, that sounds great. And if we can, that's great. If not, everyone has a schedule. I know how it goes. So thank you very much. We'll see you guys later.
Yes, thanks, Sean. I'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, sorry about that. So I feel comfortable moving on to emergency authorizations of employment. I feel this is in my wheelhouse, as I am the one that issues these and I'm getting them in gosh, loads and loads every single day. So selfishly, I'd love to chat about this, and not because I don't mind the work, but I feel like, gosh, is there some way that this can, I don't know. I guess my biggest area and what I put here is repeat offenders. And by that, what I mean is every year, say a teacher gets an emergency authorization for K-12 music in a school, they post it for the next year, they don't get any applicants. So that same person then applies the next year, because remember that emergency authorization is attached to a school district and not to a person. So they'll do it again, and then they'll post it and they'll do the steps for an emergency authorization. Nobody applies. And the same person I can honestly tell you that there are people that are on like their 5th or 6th emergency authorization for the same position. And so I guess I don't have the answer. I don't mind doing it, but I just feel like, my gosh, these people have, some of them 3 to 5 years of experience teaching this in the same district. Shouldn't they be getting some sort of certification? Shouldn't we be creating some kind of pathway? So that's a conversation starter. I'm just sharing my thoughts on it, which may mean nothing, but I see some heads and some hands up. So please fill in the gaps and help me with this conversation. Go ahead, Christine.
Okay, well, we were at our NEMAS meeting with superintendents yesterday, And I asked around in the room, I think had 16 superintendents, and 3 of which, besides myself, have had issues with this emergency cert. The problem is you can have a teacher that's certified, but not in the right area. And they will cause you to have a ding. You know, you'll end up with an unaligned error because your teacher's in their misassigned areas, where you can just get anybody walking down the street to get an emergency cert, and they're perfectly good to go. And that's a problem. I think that is not something we want to encourage. We should have some sort of platform where they can be taking classes as they're working through, and this counts as student teaching, or I don't know what, but something. And I don't want the emergency cert to go away. I want to be clear, that is a Hail Mary for us, and sometimes that is all we have left. But your particular scenario, as well as there was Culbertson specifically mentioned that he had somebody who had a tech ed master's degree, but was misassigned because he taught science. Well, STEM kind of all goes together these days, but Opheim had their music is the same way, and we're trying to get around it by doing music history. I mean, you know, what you're doing is you're making superintendents play a game, and we're trying to do what's best for kids, and having somebody who's certified is better than just somebody walking off the street. Hinsdale, the same deal, like, okay, small schools, part-time PE and part-time history, social studies, but they're going to take a ding for that, or they could get an emergency person to work half-time that is perfectly home free. That's this year. So I'm just saying this is a problem. So to reiterate, I don't want emergency cert to go away, but I think somehow we need to not punish school districts for misassigning teachers when it's just fine to have somebody wander by and get them off the street. There's got to be some sort of balance.
Thank you. Angela?
Thank you. What a great conversation. And glad that it is, you know, at the top of your interest list, Crystal, too, because it's certainly at the interest of at the top of my list. So I think that to, where did she go? Her point, the gal that just spoke.
Christine.
Christine, I think to her point, I think that we do have a real opportunity to use pre-service teachers who are already on their path to completion, on their path to licensure. And one of the things that I proposed earlier was an opportunity to step into some of these emergency auth roles, but have certain supports. And those were outlined, I think, 2 meetings ago. If we're going to take a student teacher who is not yet done, but has the full recommendation and support of their EPP, we can partner with a school district to meet that district's needs before that teacher or that advanced student teacher is done at their educator prep program. I think that we would have to make sure that certain pieces are met. For example, they are on the salary schedule, they're on track for tenure, they participate in TRS, they're a part of the collective bargaining unit, etc. I know that that's where we stand as a university system, but we think that there's a real pathway here, but not necessarily through the emergency auth. And maybe it's the district owns an opportunity at an emergency authorization, like Crystal said, and that's theirs. But at the end of the day, we want to put our teachers on a pathway to licensure. And that was that 2A that I suggested. And maybe that's not going to go anywhere, but maybe that's that initial provisional license here that would put a teacher who's close to completion of one of our EPPs in the classroom earlier than what they might already go. And so I think there's some language in what I sent to you a couple of weeks ago to make this happen, and also to make it happen not only more strategically for the district, but more strategically for the EPP. So they can say, this is what we're looking at. This is what Crystal's identified as areas and districts where they have these specific emergency auths. And then districts can say, okay, well, gosh, you know, so-and-so is ready for this opportunity. We can support them to this and be the gatekeepers that way on our end, and certainly through the emergency auth. I think there's some real promise in all of this conversation.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, thanks. With the emergency authorization, I know there are some states that do have a limit, Crystal, where they say that you can only have a certain amount, similar to what we do with our class 5, that you can only have it for a certain amount of time. Both the BPE and the class 5, we do have programs across the state to support teachers that are moved into areas that they're not licensed to get those licenses within 3 years. I think the one thing that we do lack as a state are online program options for people to complete when they're not close to a campus and to complete in a timely fashion. And so, you know, thinking about how we provide access to teachers where they are in a way that they can finish in a timely manner to add those areas they're not licensed in. With that emergency authorization and the BP in class 5 as well, you know, I always think about the fact that what do you do when you have a classroom that Westby is a great example. I've talked to them every year for the last several years trying to get a music teacher. You don't want districts to cut programs because they can't find people to go into the rooms with the kids. And all kids deserve access to education. They deserve quality teachers. They deserve, you know, the absolute best. And so not just looking at that authorization, but looking at how we get the programming to them. Angela's comment about the advanced student teacher, there's some potential to do some new things there in ways that we haven't in the past. So I think this is one that not just looking at the law, but also looking at the responses and how we build infrastructure to support districts that are really struggling to find people using innovative ways to do that. I think it's really a two-prong approach that we need to look at.
Great, and there's a lot going on in the chat. I do know that chapter 58 this morning talked a lot about this as well. Tristan had said, and then McCall just put a comment in the chat. Diane, go ahead.
You know, I'll tell you that I'm really interested in the specific data. And I appreciated watching in on chapter 58, the discussions on the student teachers and emergency authorization and the amount of crossover there is in that area. I support the idea that Angela has proposed, and that is creating a pathway with a specific coursework and support for teachers who move into a classroom, definitely. Also, I'll just say that I like the idea of looking at the data and back to John's comment of online coursework being made available. And if we actually knew specifically where the shortages were, we could set priorities for getting that coursework and potential mentorship and support for teachers who are put in that circumstance. And finally, the last thing I would say is I understand the concern about getting the ding that is mentioned often by administrators working hard trying to fill the roles in their schools. But I also would not want to make it so that we didn't have the information we needed from accreditation status to understand where our shortages are. So I think if we move too quickly to lower the bar for accreditation, we may not have all the information we need to see where we need teachers and what needs to be done in order to get the teachers that we need specifically. So thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Something I do actually first, Diane, what data are you wanting? Like what teachers? I mean, we do have a report for last year. I can tell you how many I've done so far. I still have more to do.
Yeah.
Okay, that kind of. Okay.
Those trend lines would be really good. The areas and the trend lines. Thanks.
Yep.
Appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you this came up at licensure committee this week as well. We had the legal team look into special education. Currently, you are not allowed to get emergency authorization as a district for special education. And we wanted to look into that, and it came back that that still holds true. So that is an area of concern. And I can tell you right now, I get a lot of districts. Julie, what is it, 57 57 positions that are still unfilled in special education in our state right now, or at least maybe a week ago, that was the current data. And a lot of talk about, I have a student teacher, or I have, that's in special education coursework. Could they fill this hole and have somebody as their mentor kind of thing, so there's a lot of conversation around, ways to, I guess from my perspective, the contact that I'm getting from districts, I would say more than not are districts with candidates that aren't licensed, but they have background. They have a bachelor's in music, but it's not in music education. And so, they're trying to find people that truly do fit. And it's not just somebody coming, from the street into these roles, but it's a problem, and it's an area of concern. I agree. I don't think it's something that should go away, because there are always situations where this is needed. But I love the conversation around creating some kind of pathway for those people that keep, filling the role year after year. That at this point they could possibly be that teacher, with the certification, if we had some sort of a pathway for them. So Julie, did you want to comment on anything here, or?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. So a couple of comments really quickly on the comments that have been made. John mentioned, like, what's the time frame, right? There's currently no time frame. We have folks that have issued emergency authorizations for 5 years. And so that's a question, right? And when he says two-pronged, then how do you then get to those folks to provide maybe something that can get them to licensure in a quicker fashion than that? I think Diane's point about the data is really critical. We've seen in the last 2 years a pretty big spike in emergency authorization. So the question becomes, why is that, right? And then how is that addressed maybe in more areas than in just 57, but in 58 and 55? So Diane had even mentioned about accreditation. It's true, right? Like an emergency authorization, you don't necessarily get deficiencies if they're equivalent to if someone who's not licensed. So it's better to have an emergency license than have someone who is not licensed at all. But an emergency authorization does not lead to a high quality educator payment, which makes sense, right? Due to the nature of it. And then Heather has a question in here around internships. So internships are for people who already have, or a special education internship, that somebody already has like a class 1 or 2 license in some other area. And then they go into an internship and they partner with one of the universities, and then they're teaching in special ed in that area while they're completing the internship, but they already have if you will, a current certification in another area. So the emergency authorization really is disconnected from internships. And again, emergency authorization is granted to the district and is not anything affiliated with with certification, if you will. It's not for an individual, it's for the district. So when you apply, it's a district applying to say, will you grant me this because I've tried to fill this position and I can't. So I'm going to have to fill it with somebody who doesn't have a license. I hope that makes sense. There's just some of the thoughts I was thinking about as you guys were talking.
Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you. If then using that rationale that the authorization is for the district, I guess why would it be denied or declined if we had a out of certification area authorized teacher that we would like to fill in that role?
So Nick, this is Julie. Let me just get a little clarity on your question. So you're saying if you have a teacher who's already certified in another area, could you issue them, could the district apply for an emergency authorization to have the teacher teach in an area that they're not certified in? Is that your question?
Yeah, we've been talking about music. We have a K certified individual that would like with some music background that desperately wants to fill the 5-year vacancy in the music department. So if the authorization is for the school and for that music role, not to the individual filling it, why would the K-8 certified educator be ineligible for that emergency authorization?
So I think there's a couple different terminologies there, right? We've got licensed teachers. We've got teachers who fall under emergency authorization. We have not licensed teachers. And then what we call misassigned teachers. So those are, and that's in the accreditation language, right? So misassigned teachers are teachers that are teaching outside of the area that they're endorsed in, right? And so, and many times those folks would be in an internship, right? So, because they could be able to teach in that area while they're getting endorsed in that area. So I almost feel like when you say that, it's similar to what John was saying about almost a two-pronged approach again, of saying, okay, there's one piece around what's their status, but then the second is around how do you bring programming to them to get them there. So what do you do with misassigned teachers? What are some creative ways that we could do to address that? Does that mean finding some more flexibility, as Jewel had mentioned on a couple of comments here, around other pathways to getting endorsed in these other areas that are quicker and can be brought to the district in a more thoughtful way? So I don't know if that answers your questions, but that's just some of my thinking. So what you're talking about is really overlapping quite a bit with Chapter 55 under accreditation. And I think needs to be updated because we're no longer No Child Left Behind, right? And that kind of comes from that era around being highly qualified and teaching in the area that you're highly qualified to teach in. There's no longer a federal requirement around that, or if you will.
Okay. Angela, go ahead.
I would just offer that the MUS, we stand ready to tackle some language so that it could better support our students who are already in this situation.
Thank you. Eric, did I see your hand up?
Yes, just briefly, I think this just illustrates the interconnections between the different pieces. So just kind of bringing us back to how can this problem be approached through Chapter 57? And, different people have different parts of the problem. So clearly we need to look at Chapter 55. Maybe that's what Christine was asking, and others have asked for. Maybe there's an opportunity for flexibility. Clearly the EPPs have a role and interest in bringing programming to students. So how does making a tweak in Chapter 57 potentially address this problem? It seems like it's that looking at a specific pathway, perhaps through Class 2, as Angela has identified, perhaps it's through the provisional license. But just some incentive to get people out of this limbo status without penalizing districts for using this when they don't have any other alternatives to get quality teachers in the classroom. So I don't know if if coming up with an alternative approach, taking Angela's as one through the Class 2, coming up with some scenario to move people through a Class 5 potentially. That seems like that's where Chapter 57 could be leveraged.
Yeah, Eric, it makes me think a little bit about, we have the 5A, which is kind of a part of the provisional around the assessment. Is there a possibility for a 5B or 5C that leads to and addresses some of this under emergency authorization?
So there's questions here, I think, that associated with our conversation from last week. So last week we put forth a provisional license that really just required a degree and a path in an EPP program. And so if that was to move forward, not saying it would, but if that was to move forward, then the questions would be, do we want to grant anything besides an emergency authorization license to anybody who doesn't have a bachelor's degree or isn't planning to become or involved in some teacher preparation program. Now, I think the flexibility that exists there is if the language stayed as, a plan to complete a preparation program, there's a lot of flexibility for programs to be created that might not have to be 4-year programs, right? I mean, there are lots of EPPs, I don't know if Montana does or not, that offer like endorsement programs that are 15 or 20 hours, or even the alternative certification programs that are, that are 2 years that grant things. So for me, it's we're talking around a lot of things, but what do we want to happen, right? So like in the emergency authorization right now, a pre-service teacher can obtain that, and they're on their way to, they're in a pathway, right? Angela?
So, if you go back to Crystal's conversation, it is the district that has the emergency authorization. And so what we would like to do ideally is put our pre-service teachers on a path towards licensure. And so they can go in and they can hold a place in a district that has the emergency authorization under that emergency authorization. But we're no further with them on their path towards licensure as a teacher. And so what Eric just spoke to, what Julie just spoke to, what if we more strategically, we knew who these emergency authorizations were going to, we were contacting, communicating with our EPPs. We put these EPP students on a path towards licensure to fill some of these emergency authorizations. Now that wouldn't negate maybe the emergency authorization status that a district would seek for a certain position. But what it would do is it would allow for more strategic planning on the end of the EPP to connect with who is out there and what, and get those teachers, those pre-service folks, maybe into a 2A or a 5A kind of a plan.
Any final thoughts? So the next one should be very short, and I think we might actually be able to vote. So I'll take it as a win for today. And McCall, I know you had mentioned this in yours, maybe not in the same area, so we can talk through that. But something that keeps coming up in the most recent month with me, we have unusual cases that the superintendent brings to the Board of Public Ed. If it's not within that 30-day window, the notice for the hearing, we have to let the applicant know, and they have to submit a letter saying that they, are fine with not having that 30-day window. However, when I reference it to them about that notice of hearing, right now it lives in chapter 1057-602, which is for disciplinary actions. So then if this is an unusual case, say a teacher, has nothing to do with anything disciplinary, it's odd. And I have to say, please note that this has nothing to do with disciplinary action. It's for your unusual case. So all I'm asking and suggesting is to put the same verbiage, and I can pull it up if you'd like to see it, but having that notice of hearing live in the unusual cases, just like it lives in the disciplinary piece. And McCall, if you'd like to elaborate on that, please feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, that's something that we've done internally since this unusual case has come back to the board to make determination on since 2016. Since we've gotten a lot more, we've had to try to think creatively through how we do that. And 30 days has always been our practice, but it wasn't necessarily within the ARM. So I would absolutely agree that we add the 602 language. Obviously, we'll have to change the disciplinary pieces to just be general case language. But I think that makes the most sense. I'd also like us to add both here on 109 and 602 language around being able to waive the notice. So something like the educator may waive their right to 30 days notice in order to be placed on the next meeting agenda, something specific so that Crystal, when you guys are reaching out to them to have that waived, that it's just right there in rule and there's no questions about it. So I would agree. I can put that in the chat too.
Okay. I'm really trying to multitask, guys, sorry. So I want to put the wave piece because that's absolutely right. That's what I meant of this too.
And I just added that. So we would absolutely agree that that's something that needs to be changed.
Oops, wrong button. Any other comments on this? Does it make sense? Do you have any questions on this? I guess I could put the language up again if you'd like to see. So basically what we're saying is to put this language with some tweaks for it not being, because this lives under the disciplinary piece in 602 within the unusual case piece. And then obviously add what McCall said, which is absolutely true, to waive their right to the 30 days in order to be placed on the board meeting agenda, knowing that the board only meets every other month. You know, if you miss that 30 days and we don't get that, then they have to wait essentially 2 months until they're, you know, would be brought in front of the board. I'd love to vote on this one. Is anyone opposed to adding this language? And we can bring back next week. I can have it added and, you know, a red line with it. So how about we vote? Is anyone opposed to adding it with knowing that next week you'll see a red line version of the language? You know, I will have that for you to then vote on that piece next week. But right now you're just voting if you're opposed to adding it. Okay. All right, so next week I will have, I'll kind of combine it and maybe McCall, you could help me with that just because we're on the same page with it. And then we'll have that for you to vote on to bring forward.
I'm happy to work on that with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right. Oops. What's our time? Okay, so the last one in this section to look at is 112 license of exchange teachers. We at the OPI said to leave it as is, but some input that we got more than once is asking if we could include the J1 visas here. And so Julie, I'd love for you to share your thoughts since we talked about this and you about why it can't live here, but maybe that we could add it as another one.
Yeah, so you guys, 1057, 112 about exchange teachers. I want to clarify what exchange teachers means and the definition of exchange teacher. So exchange teachers, much like an exchange student, it's a program where you send one of your teachers, for example, to Australia, and an Australia teacher comes to teach in one of your classrooms. So it's an exchange teacher. And so what it currently reads is that you can get a 5 provisional license to an exchange teacher who is working with an exchange program with a school district or a university. And currently, we have not been issuing any class 5s to exchange teachers. And so I just wanted to bring some clarity around that, because exchange teacher in the definition is kind of living in 1057, 110, 1, and not in the definitions in 102. And I think there's some misunderstanding between the definition of exchange teacher and international teacher, because an international teacher currently, they're just considered a teacher that would be within chapter 4, that they're applying for a class 1, 2, or 5 license. So they'd have to do the same things that other teachers need to do in those cases. And so when we say J1 visas here, my question is that really about certification, or is that more about the recruitment that we're having around some of our international teachers, because they have to do a background check. They have to have a social security number or a tax identification number to even apply for a license. They have to pass the praxis. They have to show that they have attended a EPP and had their student teaching. And we do that through their transcripts being converted and measured to see if they're equivalent to preparation in the within the United States. So I guess my question is do we need to kind of clean up the language around exchange teachers? Is this something still that's currently going on that's relevant? Or do we need to add something around international teachers? I guess my question is, when we're talking about J1 visas, where are we at? I say that to you guys because even if you have a student who's an international student, you have to get a visa to be a student. A J1 visa is about your status, your residency status. And so love to hear some thoughts on what's happening and where we could address that when we're talking about international teachers, because I don't think it's exchange teachers. But comments, questions, love to hear more about, because folks are talking a lot about the international teachers.
I was hoping you'd raise your hand, Dan. Go ahead.
Right. What I would love to see out of this is the same, I guess, structure or pathway. As easy it is then to grant an exchange teacher a class 5 license. Why can't we have I don't remember where we are now, 5B, C, D, I don't know whichever one we've talked about adding extra ones in there, but couldn't we get a component to allow for all those things to take place? So you have a licensed teacher in a foreign country, okay, which, you know, goes through much of the same rigor as finding a licensed teacher from Texas. But if the pathway were easier, at least to start with, give them the 3 years or give them a 2-year, whatever. I mean, I'd rather see 3 just to keep it consistent, because you're right, Julie, there are a number of things that not exchange teachers, that international teachers have to accomplish before you can even basically start to pay them. You know, we get a J1 teacher in on August 15th. They show up the following, 2 days or so, and you try to start the process to getting them, licensed, and they send that in, and knowing that full well they have to, in the meantime, go to Social Security office. There's just got to be an easier pathway to allow schools to be able to begin that process, whatever it might be, even if it was emergency in the same case. Let's buy some time somewhere along the way for, some of these teachers who are filling the needs that our own systems can't fill.
So Dan, what I hear you saying is that, like, right now, currently, there's a lot of time to get all the additional paperwork that a international teacher would need to provide. And it's quite a bit of paperwork, a lot more, like a lot on the districts, right? There's a lot more paperwork for an international teacher on the district side, even to, do they have a sponsor for a J1 visa? Who's paying for the sponsorship? And there's a lot that goes into it in terms to even be able to pay them, because they don't quite have that tax identification number or that social security number yet. So I hear you saying, like, how could we address that piece where they're getting the transcript, they might need the praxis. I know that we just looked at one, was it yesterday, Dan, around a teacher, an international teacher who hasn't taken the praxis yet, needs time to take the praxis, but doesn't qualify for the 5A because they have not had 6 semester credits in the last 5 years. And that's also causing a little bit of concern that a lot of our international teachers are falling under, which I know we've talked about previously in another meeting. So that's another piece that connects to this. But what I hear you saying is, can we address this in some other kind of pathway? So maybe it's a 5A, 5B, 5C, 2A, 2B, 2C.
Yes.
We're just talking about tiers here. So yeah. Okay.
Right. Yep. That's
Thanks.
what I'm asking for.
So I guess, oh, go ahead.
So the question then, you guys, is 1057-112 still relevant, or?
That's what I was gonna say.
Does the definition maybe need to be, do we need to update definitions in 1057-102 and add those definitions for an exchange teacher versus an international teacher? Should we repeal 1057-112?
I just pulled it up if you need to read it.
We have in Bozeman in at least the last 5 years had a program where we've had some exchange with some teachers in Egypt. So I know that does still happen, but I think what Dan's describing is much different. And so I think having some additional language, Julie, like you said, clarifying what this is. So I don't think, I think we'd have to talk to maybe Sam's or someone else to see would it make sense to get rid of 112 as it is currently written. But I think definitely adding language that's more specific to bringing in teachers from other countries and what that looks like to simplify that process. That's definitely important because that is being used more. I get the sense that's being used more than the exchange between the two countries.
Okay. Thanks, John. That's really good to know.
All right. Well, I am gonna make an executive decision. I know, Julie, you need a few minutes. Just so we can take one off the table. I'm gonna skip forward to subchapter 5. And it is on social workers, nurses, and speech and hearing therapists. As I looked through yours, I didn't see many comments. We did not have anything to change. So I would propose a vote to say to leave 1057-501 as is. Does anyone object? And this is strictly just so that it can be taken off the table. Go ahead, Angela.
My only thought as I looked at that and even thought about weighing in on anything really pertain to what is at the core of chapter 55 in regard to ratio to student, teachers, nurse to student. And so that was really all that I thought about. I mean, but as so much of our conversation today has leaned us back towards 55, I think that this is one of those pieces that certainly could be reflective of a 55, 57, and a 58 conversation, but not alone, not in the licensure realm. But I do think that there are things that need to be examined, especially as it pertains to the nurse ratio.
So Angela, does that mean you want to look into it further or just make sure that, go ahead. I'm just trying to.
Oh, I appreciate that. And sorry for my lack of clarity. I think what I'm just saying, I really thought about putting something in here and I just don't think it's a licensure piece on this.
Got it. Okay.
I think it's more of a chapter 55 consideration that needs to be made.
Thank you. That makes total sense. So any objection? Oh, Dan, go ahead. Thank you.
All right, yeah, all I want to say is, but isn't that why we have the class 4? I mean, we have a class 4 license for nurses to get that if they've had their 10,000 hours, 5 years of service, they can get that class 4. I'm just wondering why this is necessary. I mean, because
and there's a class, yeah. So let me clarify. Class 6 is a specialist license for a counselor and a psychologist. social workers, nurses, and speech and hearing therapists are not licensed through Educator at the OPI. They're actually licensed in a different agency to be a practicing social worker or a practicing nurse.
Right. But all that really takes though to get that class 4 is just submitting. Yeah, you just have to submit. If you've worked for 5 years in a field, you can submit that and then it's approved at OPI. So I'm not sure why we would need to. I mean, yes, they do carry a professional license outside of education, but we already have a pathway in here in class 4 endorsement for them to be licensed. And I'm just not sure why that wouldn't be used to license those teachers, to license those nurses or social workers or speech hearing therapists as teachers.
So remember, so Dan, what you're talking about, class 4, which you're correct. Class 4 is for CTE endorsements, if you will. And so there are some particular endorsements in CTE that, for example, medical, that field. So sometimes a nurse might become endorsed in a 4A, 4B, or 4C to provide instruction through that avenue if they have the work hours and the necessary components, if it's leading to CTEA. But for example, if you have this is totally different than that. What this is referencing is like if you have a nurse and you have a nurse go in and actually teach a 4th grade, teaching a 4th grade class, then they have to be licensed as a teacher. So meaning they are issued a license outside of OPI to be a school nurse, right? They get a separate license. What this means though is, what it's referring to is if you're actually then teaching a class, say you're a social worker and you start teaching a class, then you have to be licensed as a teacher. And that could be a 1, it could be a 2, it could be a 5, or it could be a 4.
Yeah, that was not where I was thinking that was going. So yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I just was. Why on earth? Why would we want a nurse teaching English? I'm not sure. That's or Latin. Latin I could see, right? But okay, no, that makes sense. I was just thinking content, because I have 2 of them this year, which is great.
Yeah, it does. It's awesome, and it does come up in chapter in a class 4 license often.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so any objections to leaving 501 as is? Once, twice. Okay, I'm gonna. I knew that my thoughts were a little hefty, but that's okay. We will get to more next week. I know, Julie, you needed a few minutes at the end here. I didn't give you as much as you asked for. I apologize, but we're going to end our conversation there within the subchapters. I definitely will have what we're, our agenda and where we're going next week. I have a good thought in my head in terms of where we go with this, and it probably will, bleed into the following week as well. So next week we're going, I don't know if this will be, I guess, Julie, say what you want to say, and then we'll decide where we go next week.
Okay, can you just let me show my screen really quick?
Yep, of course, sorry.
You're good.
Can you share?
I can't share yet. I'm disabled.
Tristan, you might need to do that.
There you go. I was
No.
clicking the wrong buttons.
You're good. Okay, can you guys see that?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna put this, you guys, tomorrow, no later than tomorrow, into your Google folder. So you can have some data to kind of look at and peruse. So I just wanted to share with you what you'll be seeing in there. We did do some research and review phase prior to this task force. So there's some reports in there I think would be important for you to see. So one of them is around a consolidated report for chapters 57 and 58, which was research that was done with focus groups. There were surveys that were sent out and then followed up with focus groups. I think there's some interesting data in there for you to kind of take a look at. And so what that report will show is, for example, charts like this on reciprocity, impact on recruitment by, for example, different roles, aspiring teacher versus a current teacher, and kind of how they feel about that. There's some pieces in there, for example, around, how is salary impacting recruitment? What's the emphasis on that? So that report has some good information around just different components of licensure and the impact on that. So I'll put this in there and then be sure you have access to that report. Also, we did some research, you guys, on denials over the last 5 years of who were being denied licenses and why, based on what rule they did not meet. So for example, you'll see in 2016, there was a special education teacher who was denied an endorsement because of the fact that she attended a master's program in Texas and in that program in Texas, it didn't lead to licensure in Texas. But it was for a particular emphasis in special education for transition IEPs. That's for more of our middle to high school students. And so this kind of outlines some of the reasons, but what we found, you guys, is when we first did that initial research for denials, it really didn't help us understand for us, the folks that maybe didn't officially get denied because there were minimal denials, but where in the process did they get hung up and then maybe just kind of exit out because they didn't quite get to finishing it because they found out that they potentially didn't meet so we actually did some research as well and asked some questions about, indicate why you did not complete your Montana Educator licensure application. What were you seeking? What requirements did you not meet? So we could get a sense of that. And so we took in January and did some applications under initial licenses that were in and sent this email and this survey out to them to say, why did you stop the process? Where are you at in the process? Do you still plan to do this? And if you are, what barriers are getting in your way because you've been in the system for quite a while? So we kind of did that to try to understand. These were folks that maybe didn't quite make it to denial, but were not completing the process and wanted to understand that. So we had some responses. For example, like some people were saying, well, it was personal and financial. I have to take the praxis again. And I think $150 is ridiculous. I'm trying to figure out how to get verification on my previous teaching history. I've got to get that done. That's getting in my way. So this data will be in there in that folder as well. And then you guys, I did it. I got the praxis data. I got all of it and got it off to Ed Northwest as well so that they could do some synthesis of that data and get some stuff back to us, not only for chapter 57, but for 58. And so you guys, these are the kinds of things that I'm going to include in your folder, in your data folder. I'll call it your data folder, if you will. So you'll see things like this, from the praxis, who took the test, what were those tests in? And then you'll see things like this. What was the pass rate for those tests? So for example, what we're seeing for mathematics content knowledge for the praxis results that were submitted to the OPI for licensing purposes, we're seeing about a 37% pass rate. Then we also have pass rates for praxis as well, based upon the 10 different university systems in Montana. So there's a difference between the scores that are obtained as part of an EPP here in Montana versus all of the scores that are reported to the OPI for certification purposes. And so then you'll see like a test that was given for all a 1-year pass rate, what we're seeing over that. So you can start to kind of see pass rates there, the number of people that took it, the number that passed, and the percentage of pass rates. We even have data for 5-year pass rates from our institutions as well. So what I wanted to say to you is, I'm going to put a data folder, if you don't mind, into your Google site. I'll work with Tristan to get that in there tomorrow, just so that you'll be prepared to have some further conversation and have some time to just kind of dig through it a little bit and see what you're finding in there. So thanks to Diane and Jewel. I know they've been advocating, and Angela has as well, to say, give us some data. We want to see some data, not just the anecdotal stories that you're sharing with us that can kind of help us understand, even like the conversation that we started today with, like how many people are we even talking about that have this 4.8 endorsement? So just want to be able to be sure that you guys have access to some of that data, not only during these meetings, but offline as well. So that's what I had for you. Questions for me, Crystal, on that, or the group?
Looks like Angela.
Angela?
Yep.
And I think Jacob helped with my answer. You sent it to 600, so we can then, or more than 600, so we can maybe assume then that more than 600 at some point stopped the licensure process. And that's over a course. And is that in the slides? I'm just trying to make sure I'm ready to digest that. Is that 600 over how long of a period?
No.
So
That's the total survey. So that was just one question. So it wasn't just, I don't know. It was, I can tell you how many pre-service teachers responded, or aspiring teachers. Hang on just a second.
Yeah, so Angela, we're talking about two different sets of data. There was data that was done to all kinds of stakeholders about licensure and about educator preparation programs. And that was a different survey that was sent out kind of fully to more people than just those that are currently in the queue to apply for licensure. The report that I was talking about, so there's two different sets of data. The report I was talking about was, we took an opportunity to say, okay, we see we've got over 160 or something applications in the queue of folks who are applying for initial license, and they're getting close to having been in there for a year. So it's like 9 months to 10 months. And so what we were wanted to cue that group to say is, what's going on for you? Is this like a processing issue? Are you waiting to get background checks? Are you waiting to get more information? Do you really intend to complete this, or have you stopped and have no intention of continuing because something has happened and maybe you weren't qualified? And so this was a January data. The one that talks about that was followed up with a focus group, that was a different set of data that initial report that I showed you that picture on. So that was done, I think, in March. So I'll try to clarify like what data sets we're talking about when I put it in the folder, like name it, if that makes sense.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Can't wait to digest it all.
The only final thing I wanted to try to bring up, and I know people are headed out since we're over time, it has been requested to change our time, and I kind of want to give options. And for those that are here, you kind of are our voices. We've had this time for a while now, and you may have that set, so it's hard to adjust. If we could move it up by an hour or a half hour, how many people would that affect? My thoughts is to leave it, but if people are flexible and can move it so that others can be here a little bit longer, then I am absolutely fine with that as well. I've asked my team, and everyone is able to move it if possible. So I guess if anyone has any thoughts, I wanted to honor the question and the request.
We've got some comments going on in the chat about it all.
Oh, thank you. My chat's hidden. So I think meeting in the middle would be just bumping it up a half an hour. So if we did 1 to 2:30, then people could stay a little longer, but it's not totally changing schedules. I'm going to say that seems okay from what I'm seeing. No one is objecting. I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, thank you. And that'll be helpful. So for next week, I'm not sure exactly. We're going to meet tomorrow to strategize and plan our next meeting. I feel really good about today. I know we didn't get through a lot, but it flowed. We've got a lot of discussion, great research from Julie, and we've made some decisions. So that's good too. So I appreciate you all. I'm not going to commit to what we will be doing next week. Just after we talk tomorrow, we will get you that agenda. It has been requested to get you the slides at least a day in advance, and those were posted yesterday. So I did my best with that. So take a, if you'd like to view them beforehand. Any other comments or feedback, please, feel free, let us know. I know, like I said, I'm trying my best to stay on top of phones and email. Email is definitely easier for me right now because I'm checking it at all hours of the day. Going forward in the next few weeks, I don't know if Tristan really wants me to share, but I will be your main contact as she is getting married next week. So I will be helping out in some of that technical stuff that she's so amazing at. And so if you have questions, if you want me to post anything, any research or add your Google sheet, just please feel free to email me and I will do my best. And obviously Tristan deserves some time off for such an exciting time. So with that said, we're way over time. I appreciate you all. Keep in touch if there's anything you need or I can do, and we will see you next week. Have a wonderful Labor Day long weekend. Bye-bye.
Crystal, before you jump off, I was just going to say on the last, the timeline. So if we are going to do SISPAC on the 14th, I just want to we'll be really flexible, but we're going to have to get our members that information like by the 7th, maybe by that Friday. So just trying to be thoughtful that like anything we do here, if it has to go to OPI and have like major restructuring before it comes to us, that could be an issue.
Okay.
Just because we have to send it out to them.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping we can strategize tomorrow in our planning session and really figure out what way we go the most. I mean, I feel like it was effective today. We just have so much to get to. So yeah, I will keep that in mind. And I wasn't suggesting, I wasn't planning on meeting on October 7th. I'm just afraid we're not going to get to everything. However, I know that everyone needs to view it and get it to SISPAC. So
I don't want to rush you, and I do want to, and we do want to be flexible too, because I think that obviously it's important to get this done in October. But I just know that that's typically our timeline. So
no,
don't want to be any surprises.
Absolutely. No, I don't plan on a meeting. I'm fearful we're not going to get through everything. So as we plan and strategize, I will be in touch and we can kind of talk through what we're thinking.
Well, thanks, Crystal.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.